Hello everybody, my name is Kevin and welcome back to another album review. And today, I'm talking about the 12th album from Pink Floyd, The Final Cut. So, after the Wall tour finished and Richard Wright officially left the band, there were still some songs written for The Wall that weren't released. In fact, this album was originally conceived as the soundtrack to the Wall movie, because all these songs just didn't appear on the album and, the band members thought, well, they could go onto the movie or something. So all of these songs that were somewhat relevant to the plot were thrown onto the album, and everyone thought that it could just be a plain old soundtrack album or something. But then the Falklands War broke out, and Waters basically rewrote all of these songs to be about actual war and almost not have anything to do with the actual movie. Tensions were once again really high between band members. Waters and Gilmour basically hated each other at this point. They brought in Michael Kamen to do orchestrations and even replaced Richard Wright for the most part, and even he didn't get along with the band members. Most of the piano, organ, or synthesizer melodies are played by Michael Kamen or Andy Bown of Status Quo. And while Nick Mason does play drums on a lot of songs here, his main contribution is mostly just sound effects. And once again, just like The Wall, the final cut is basically Roger Waters' solo. Most of the songs are basically centered around him. And the fact is that this album is basically a solo Roger Waters album just featuring David Gilmour and Nick Mason. But he couldn't release it on his own because of contract reasons, so that's why the final cut is attributed to the Pink Floyd name. But as for my opinion, what do I think of this album? Well, it's pretty good, but it has a lot of flaws in it. This album is basically just 46 minutes of talking about the pointlessness of war and calling out all the big political leaders of the 80s and all that kind of stuff. It's basically a concept about the pointlessness of war, and that's it. I feel like the only way you can love this album is if you've had a relative who passed away due to war. So let's go down track by track, I guess. The opener, The Post-War Dream, sets up basically a lot of the themes for the album. And it all sounds quite emotional. The organ melody is really sad. And Waters talks about his father's death. And it could be really emotional if it wasn't for the fact that Waters is singing about this in such a basic way that it feels like shallow whining. And then at the end there's this sudden rock breakdown and then the song just ends. It is a very strange opener and not at all what you would expect from Pink Floyd of all bands. Good God. And I'm also not the biggest fan of the second track, Your Possible Pasts, where Waters dives even deeper into the subjects of war. The rock breakdown chorus is kind of cool, but other than that, it's not really all that memorable. Gilmour plays a really uninspiring guitar solo, which is really shocking. And one of the few is only a minute-long track, and it's about a war veteran returning to civilian life to teach. And if this was on The Wall, this could have been about the school teacher, and this song is actually about the school teacher who has now returned from war and he's now taking out his anger on all the kids at school, which is pretty insane. And if it would have been on The Wall, then it would have hit pretty hard, but out of context, it's just not all that interesting. And then there's When the Tigers Broke Free, which was only released on all editions of the album since 2004. And this song basically just tells the story of how Waters' father died in World War II, and how he is betrayed that his father's death was just marked as another statistic, which, that's basically what war is, and has been for hundreds and hundreds of years now, unfortunately. But what's weird is that this song actually appeared in the beginning of the Wall movie, and was released as a single when the film came out, which is honestly pretty insane, and if this song would have been on The Wall, it would have hit pretty hard. But out of context, it's just a really beautiful song. Waters is just singing by himself over some orchestrations and choir singing on this one, and it's honestly really beautiful. One of my favorites on here. And then The Hero's Return returns to the story of the school teacher about how he has now returned from war. And remember how in The Happiest Days of Our Lives from The Wall, Roger was talking about how the teachers would always return home to their psychopathic wives? Well, in this song, the teacher can't talk to his wife, while she's still awake, so he only talks with her when she's asleep, and he recounts all of the trauma that he had to go through when he was in the war. This song is a bit more energetic, but it's not one of my big favorites on here, which is really surprising, honestly. But one of my favorites on this album is The Gunner's Dream. This song is about a gunner falling to his death in World War II during a raid, and while he's falling to his death, he's talking about this dream that he has had, where there's just peace everywhere and no one has to be scared about like terrorist attacks and everything like that. And it's a really moving moment, even though there are some very strange moments in the track, like when Waters' shouted vocal turns into a saxophone solo, and the sax solo is pretty nice on this track. And also when Waters lets out this scream as some kind of singing. It's a very moving moment and honestly quite touching and sad, and it's one of my favorites on here. Just really beautiful song. And then Paranoid Eyes is about a war veteran who is now going out onto the bar to drink all of his problems away after all the trauma he had to go through. You know, these people don't really want to talk about these things, so they just go out to the bar and everything, and they just hide away all of these, all the trauma that they had to go through. Get Your Filthy Hands Off My Desert is another 1-minute track, which is just about all of the conflicts that the big world leaders of the 80s have been involved in. It's basically an intro to the Fletcher Memorial Home, the title being a nod to Waters' father. In this song, Waters talks about how all the big world leaders of the 80s, or as he calls them, overgrown infants, should be taken to a special retirement home, and then in the final line, literally killing them as if it were the Holocaust. I mean, goddamn, the message of this song is absolutely insane, and that final line just gets incredibly dark. Holy Christ. Just a shame that the guitar solo on this track is once again pretty uninspiring, but it is still one of my favorite tracks on this album. It's just insane, and yeah, I mean, I do agree a lot with what Waters says on this track. Southampton Dock is about a woman who bravely waves the soldiers goodbye again. You know, this was the time when the Falklands War broke out, and British soldiers have stated that they will not go to another war after what happened in World War II. And now the Falklands War has broke out and they've gone out to war again, so what does it matter? And as I said, it describes a woman who waves goodbye to them, and that's pretty much it. That's the song. And then there's the title track, which was also originally conceived for The Wall. But this time it's, you know, it basically explores the same themes as The Wall. You know, isolation, sexual repression, and those kinds of things. And Waters, out of nowhere, also echoes the lyrics and melody of the song If from Adam Heartmother. Hot take, it might actually work better in this context than in the actual Adam Heartmother album. Pretty weird, I know, but whatever. And then the final verse, Waters, or should I say Pink, contemplates about committing suicide, but the phone ringing is just enough to stop him, and he said that he has never had the urge to end his life or make the final cut. This song is incredibly emotional. Like, the orchestration is absolutely beautiful, and the instrumentation is also pretty nice. I mean, it's just a wonderful song. What could I say about it? It's pretty nice. And then at the end of the song, the instrumentation is pretty quiet, and this is where Roger Waters remembers, oh right, I forgot this was a Pink Floyd album. And the quiet instrumentation is interrupted by laughter, and then suddenly... Yeah, if you couldn't tell by the way I introduced this song, Not Now John is easily my favorite track from the album. It is completely different from the rest of the album, and basically the only song on here that represents the entire band, not just Waters. And holy Christ, it is one of the craziest Floyd songs I have ever heard. This song goes into hard rock territory, with David Gilmour's screaming vocals shouting "fuck all that" and everything. And also a big shout out to the Chanter Sisters, who are performing the backing vocals on this track. They're absolutely doing a fantastic job. They're really catchy. The song explores how society basically just completely ignores the importance of what war has done and everything and all the problems in the world. Basically saying, you know, we haven't got time for this. We have to do like these Hollywood movies and whatever, and we have to worry about losing our jobs and everything. We aren't going to talk about war or anything. The song is also full of random things that happen in the background, including at the end of the song where Gilmour basically parodies the way British people drink. Like, he asks like the same question in 3 different languages, only for him to give the English translation at the end. Oi, where's the fucking bar, John? And yeah, the message of the song is absolutely right. There's a lot of crazy stuff happening in it, a lot of weird lyrical themes, and it's basically just Gilmour and Waters, like, singing back and forth whatever they can. The song actually feels like Gilmour suddenly breaking Waters', opera to suddenly shout, "Screw this stuff, now it's my time to shine." The whole song is just absolutely insane. I love it. It's one of my favorite Pink Floyd songs ever. Why did it have to be on this freaking album? So, yeah, Not Now John is an insane track. I love the crap out of it. Listening to the album and then hearing Not Now John right after the title track can seriously hit you like a brick that didn't come from the wall. I'm sorry. But yeah, it's absolutely insane. And what's even more insane is that, this is the second to last track on the album, and it's also the most intense. And then, of course, the most laid-back song on the album, Two Suns in the Sunset, has to close out the freaking thing. Now, to be fair, Two Suns in the Sunset isn't entirely laid-back. I mean, the instrumental might be laid-back and there's a saxophone solo at the end, but the lyrics are literally about a nuclear holocaust. And, the second sun in the sunset is basically the glowing fireball resulting from an explosion. So, once again, really heavy freaking topics here. But I do quite like the laid-back instrumental on this track. The sax solo is pretty cool, and hell, even if the lyrics are pretty out of place except for one part where it sounds super dramatic, this song is still one of my favorites from the record, and a pretty fitting way to end the album. But I'll tell you one problem with the song, it literally ends the album with a fade-out. Like, other Pink Floyd albums might have ended with fade-outs, but by that point, the songs have actually finished. This one, just fades out before the song even finishes, so that pretty much shows us that this album is very much not an essential listen in the Floyd catalog. So yes, that's the final cut, and yeah, it's a pretty intense listen. The production on this album very much sounds like it came from the 1980s, and does not sound like Pink Floyd at all, aside from the one song. It basically puts all of its eggs in the lyrics basket, which does show actually that Waters does care about these topics. He cares about how war is absolutely terrible and that he absolutely hates it and everything. And even to this day, he rants about politics whenever he can on social media. Nick Mason has stated that somebody has to be a professional to win an argument against Waters, and yeah, it definitely shows. The lyrics on here are absolutely intense, and I mean they perfectly highlight the pointlessness of war. But as I said, the production can feel very strange, there are a lot of strange ideas, and while not every single song on here is a keeper, the album in general is actually pretty good. And there are a lot of moments on this record that really do hit me, and there's a lot of insane lyrical themes. Waters' singing is pretty passable on most of the songs, but not all of it is great, and I definitely see why some people really criticize the record, especially those who have not been through war or anything like that. But I mean, I can't say that the final cut is a bad album, it's just kind of a mixed bag, and while I don't think the entire thing is great, I'd still kind of recommend it. Well, actually, you know what, I would probably just recommend the ones that I have, the songs that I've listed as favorites in the description, but as I said, not a great album, but I mean, there is something to be found here at least, and after this, the Floyd story just gets crazy. So, yeah, for the final cut, I'm feeling a solid 7 out of 10. But of course, this is all just my opinion. You can feel free to disagree with it. And if you have any opinions about the album, you can leave them in the comments. I'll see you guys in the next one. I'm Kev from Pest, and you've just learned a bit more about music today.